Hello and welcome to this lesson about SQL. We'll be working with the MySQL database management system, and we'll be working with the MySQL workbench. Before we get into working with the SQL statements in the workbench, I'd like to talk to you about the basic structures of the database. The database is built up of many tables. The basic structure of a table is divided into two parts. The first part are the columns. The columns define the types of data that will be placed into the table. For example, a first name, a last name, an address, and a phone number. The second part are the rows. The rows are the actual data that is placed into the table that correlate with the columns. For example, a first name, a last name, an address, and a phone number. Now I'd like to speak about the language types in SQL. There are two major types. The DDL, which is the data definition language. The data definition language defines the data types within a table. For example, numbers, strings, or just text. The other type is the DML, or the data manipulation language. This means if we're going to add data into the table, or delete it, or even change it. Next, CRUD, or CRUD. This is an acronym that stands for Create, Read, Update, and Delete. These are the four basic foundations within SQL. This gives us persistence storage, which means that our data will be consistent. We can do this through SQL statements. Some of the statements we'll be looking at today are create, alter, drop, select, update, and insert. Create, alter, and drop are part of the DDL, or data definition language. This will be defining the tables in our database. Next, update and insert are from the DML, or data manipulation language. This is the statements that we use to add or delete or change the data within our tables. The select statement is actually from the DML. However, it's mostly used to retrieve the data from our tables. That's it for that. Let's get on with working with the MySQL workbench. We have a few tasks we need to go through, so let's get started. The first task, before we can actually create a database and use the database, we must make a connection to the MySQL server. Bear in mind that this lesson is based upon that you have already installed the MySQL server and configured it, as well as the MySQL workbench. So let's get started with the MySQL workbench. When you first initiate the MySQL workbench, you will come to the welcome page. We will create a new MySQL connection. This is done by clicking on the Setup icon. Here you come up to the Setup New Connection. In this field, we can name our connection. I will name this My Newest Connection. The rest is basically default based upon how you set up your MySQL server. The host name 127.0.0.1 and the port number 3306 are default settings. Root username is also a default setting. You can either leave the password clear as not setting it, or you can add or store your password in the keychain. I will do so here. Now I'm ready to go. First, I will test my connection. I get the successful window. Hooray! And now I'm ready to go into my database management system and create a database. So I will go into my new connection here. And now I can see a query editor. Great. That's our first task. Let's go on to the next one. We can view all the databases that we have in our database management system, which is found on the local host. In order to do so, we can use the SQL statement show databases. Let's try that out. I want you to notice that I have not used capital letters in my SQL statement, which is not necessary to do so. So now I've created my statement, and now I can click on the execution icon, which is the lightning bolt, and I will see all the databases I have on my local host. Quite a few. Lovely. Next, let's look at creating a new database. Here is the SQL statement for doing so. It is a create statement, which is from the data definition language. Let's try that. We will create a database and we'll call it my new database. As I can see, I already have my new database here. I will go ahead and drop that database so we can create a new one. I'll drop this SQL statement one line down, and then I will create my new database. My database. Lovely. Let's execute these SQL statements. And there you have it. You can see the my new database is shown here. To the left is an overview of all the databases that are visible. If you don't see your new database here, you can right-click in the area, go to the bottom, and click on Refresh All. And there is your new database. Wonderful. Let's go to the next thing. Our next task will be to actually create a table called person. In the MySQL, we must define or tell MySQL which database we are going to use before we can create a table. So we'll use the use statement, and then we'll go into the create table statement. Looking into the create statement, there are 4 columns that we're going to create. The first one is going to be a form of identification number, which is good for any table. We're going to set it as an integer, which is a very large number. We're going to set it to not be null, which means when we add information into our table that this column will not be empty. We're going to set it to auto increment, and this I'll make more clear when we actually insert data into our table. Finally, for the PID or person ID, we're going to make it into the primary key. This means that the information that's going to be placed in this column is going to be unique, a one of a kind, very important. We end this line with a comma, go to the next column. We're going to use this for our first name. I named it fname. It's going to be a character varying, or varchar, and I've set it to only allow 28 characters. End it with another comma, and our next column is going to be for the last name, which I called lname. Again, varchar, and also set for 28 characters. Our last column is for the address, which was also set to varchar and 28 characters. We end this with closing parentheses and semicolon. So let's do it. I will delete this, and I will tell MySQL that I'm going to use my new database. Go to the next line, and we'll start our create statement. Create table person. I'll go ahead and set up my parentheses. So, PID is our first column. I set it to be an integer because integer is the largest number we have so far. I set it to integer because we're going to be dealing with a very large number. It's not going to be null or empty data. We wish for it to auto increment, and we're going to make this our primary key. Nice. Our next column is going to be for the first name. It's going to be a character varying, and we're going to set it to be only 28 characters. The next column is for the last name. Again, character varying and 28 characters. Our final column is for the address. It's also character varying and also contains 28 characters. No comma. And there you have it. So let's execute these statements and see what happens. Everything looks good. We can check this information that everything's good. We have up to the top right, we have 3 views that we have here. If we press the middle one, we can see that our output says that everything we've done so far is okay. Great. Let's go to the next step. That will be to be able to see what's in our table. The SQL statement for that is the select statement. Here we see where it says, where it reads select asterisk from person. The asterisk is short in SQL for all. So actually the statement says select all from person. Let's try this. We'll try our select statement, select all from person. We'll execute this, and we can see our table here underneath with our columns PID, fname, lname, and address. And there is nothing in our table yet because we have not added any information. So let's do that. We will use the insert statement. It reads insert into person, fname, lname, address. You may have noticed that I have not done anything with the PID. That is because it is set to auto increment. That means every time I add a new person into my table, it will auto increment the PID by 1. Now I will add the values Douglas, Beaver, my home. Notice that each addition, for example, the name Douglas, Beaver, and home, are set into single quotes because this is our of character varying. So let's do this. I will drop my select statement one line down, and I will I've already created the table. Now I'm going to insert into my person table, and I'm going to insert for my F name, first name, if I can spell the name right, name, I think I did, my last name, and my address. And here I will set in the values for the first name, Douglas, last name, which will be Beaver, and my address, which I'm going to say is my home. That's it. Now I can execute this. When I execute this, it will insert this information into my person table, and then I'll be able to see immediately the table. So let's execute this. There we go. So here's our table with the new information. Douglas, Beaver, my home, and you can see that the PID, since it's auto incrementing, it has set it to 1. Let's try this again. We'll just go to the top here in our insert statement, and we'll change the information to, for example, Bob. And we could say Barker. And he has a different address. We'll call it just home. Let's execute these statements. And there you can see that the PID is auto-incremented again to 2, and we have Bob Barker, who is hopefully at home. Great. That's that. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to add a new column called phone number to the person table. This is the alter statement, which is an DDL, or a DDL statement, the data definition language. And here is the statement. It says alter table, person. We're going to add the column, and we're going to call it phone number, and we're going to set it to int, which is a simple data type. So let's do that. So this alter, tell it which that is the table we're altering, and it's the person table. We're going to add a column called phone number. It's going to be an int. And then we're going to run the select all from person statement again so we can see the changes. Let's run these statements. And there you can see in our table we have the new column called phone number here. Great. Next, let's add data to the new column. Now, normally when you add data, you would use the insert statement. However, since we've already got data into our table, we need to use an update statement, which is of the data manipulation language. And here is the statement we'll be using, update person, where we're going to set the phone number to be this number, where the PID is 1. Now I chose the PID because it's a primary number, or primary key. Sorry, it's a primary key. And the reason for that is if I chose to set it by my name, Douglas, for example, then as we add more entries into our table, the chances of Douglas's will be greater. So if we decide to change it according to the first name, then we could wind up changing all of the phone numbers to be the same for all who have the first name of Douglas, if that made any sense to you. So we're going to choose the PID because it is a unique value. So let's do this. We're going to make an update statement. We're going to update person. We're going to set our phone number to equal, what was the number? 50762857. 50762850. See if we got that right. Oops, 2857. Like that. Where clause, where are we going to put it? Actually, let's put it on the next level. Where are we going to put it? You can actually do this. You may wish to, for each clause, because we have we have the update statement, but for a clause, for example, where, we can also do this with set clause. We can put these on different lines if you wish for better readability. We'll set it to where the PID is equaling 1 or is 1. Great. Let's run these statements, shall we? Look at that. How wonderful could that be? We have now added a phone number for Douglas Beaver. Shall we do it for Bob Barker? Why not? Now, he doesn't have the phone number as I do. Let's give him the old 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 number. Let's run this query. Let's run these statements. Here we go. And there we go. Thank you. Great. Wonderful. Bob Barker has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Wonderful. Let's go to the next thing. Last but not least, we are going to change the address for Douglas. Now this is changing the data. Now we're going to use update again. So let's do that. You already know how that works. So the update statement, update the person table. We're going to set the address to equal something else where the PID is 1. So let's go ahead and do that. Update person, we're going to set our address to equal, instead of home, I'm just going to say new home because I moved, obviously. Remember to single quotes because it is a character varying. And I'm going to do it after my PID 1 because that's where the Douglas information is. Let's run the queries, statements, and there we go. I have moved my address to a new home. That is it. That is that. I hope you enjoyed this lesson in the beginnings of SQL.